Very good evening to you. You're watching Newsline Prime. This evening we're going to talk to you about the latest global developments in the political arena. Our neighbouring country, India, has had its elections and the results have come out. And in England, the Prime Minister has announced her resignation. So lots of things happening internationally as well. And we're also going to talk about the importance of a national foreign policy for a country like Sri Lanka. After all, we have seen certain incidents happening in our country on the 21st of April as well. We are going to touch on all these topics. We have Mr. George Crook from the Bandaranaike Centre for International Studies here with us in the studio. Good evening to you, Mr. Cook.
Good evening, Chaturanga.
Thank you very much for being here. And of course, we have to remember and recognize the support BCIS has rendered. Every time when we have to understand a international event, a global event, BCI has always helped us, Dr. Harinda Vidanage and Mr. George Cook as well. So we have to recognize and thank you all for that as well at the outset. So let's get to it straight away, Mr. Cook. Let's go to England first. Their Prime Minister has announced her resignation and said, I will hold on to power until a new Prime Minister is selected. Democracy seems to be a trending word in that area, but I promised you earlier that I'm not going to ask you about our Prime Minister, but I want to ask this question from you. This democracy playing, it took a while. We saw it taking quite a lot of twists and turns along the way, but finally we have seen Prime Minister May announcing her resignation. Does this mean the end of this political turmoil in England, or is there more to come?
Absolutely not. And technically she can remain in office until the end of this year. You see, last year in December there was a party leadership battle and she won it, and that gives her 12 months of undisputed leadership of the party. However, she feels that she is unable to get her Brexit plans through. She's faced a lot of opposition within the party, from the opposition party, from Labour, and also from her own cabinet now. We've had so many of her cabinet members resigning. She's faced a pretty tough time in her relatively short time as Prime Minister. But once again, what we need to be mindful of the fact is, just because she resigns and she goes home, the next person has an equally tough task ahead of them. It also remains to be seen who will be filling her shoes, who comes on board at this point. There are several frontline runners. We're going to hear from Boris Johnson at some point. We're going to hear from Jeremy Hunt, the current Foreign Secretary. You even had today the resignation of the 1922 committee of influential backbenchers led by Graham Brady, who has resigned his position in anticipation of running for the party leadership, and he's one of the first who has announced his candidature so far. So it's going to be, they say before the 21st of July, we're going to see a new British Prime Minister in place. But of course, the challenges remain. It's going to be that much tougher. They've got until the 31st of October to sort it out, but there is a lot of sorting out to do until then.
All the similarities to the Sri Lankan context, but I promised our guest that I will not ask that question from him, so I want to move on. I want to bring our attention to our neighbouring country, India. Narendra Modi, for the second time the BJP has won a majority, and we are receiving reports that the Congress leader will step down. Politically, though this is India alone, geopolitically this is important even to Sri Lanka. As we've seen in the past, India has been having close relations politically with our country, and political changes there has had some impact in the Sri Lankan political arena as well. So going forward from this point onwards, what do you think we can see? A stronger Indian political arm in Sri Lankan politics as well? How do you differentiate the situation?
So Prime Minister Modi virtually had a referendum on himself in terms of testing his popularity. Theresa May tried something similar a couple of years ago, and it did not quite result in what she wanted. Prime Minister Modi has gotten what he wanted. He's gotten a much stronger mandate. You mentioned Rahul Gandhi. The Congress has done better than they did last time. They've gone from 44 to 52. And of course, when they put their coalition partners together, it's something like 101. But the BJP goes up to about 352 at that point. So the BJPs are currently well past the required 272 to form a government. Of course, what we are going to see is you're going to see a strengthening of the hand of Prime Minister Modi. Domestically, it's going to do wonders for the party. He's said to be the first non-Congress Prime Minister to serve a full 5-year term and get re-elected. It says a lot. It says a lot for the steadying of the ship in India, so to say. A country which has in the past, over in the 90s example, we had several Prime Ministers coming and going. But going into the future, you're going to see a much stronger Indian presence on the international stage, and that is something we've got to always be mindful of, especially from a Sri Lankan perspective, even from a South Asian perspective. When you look at the map of South Asia, the first country you see is India. We've always got to be mindful of that. Countries in the region have to note who your neighbors are. We cannot change our neighborhood. We continue to work with these countries. And one thing else that we could focus on, if you go back to 2014, he's swearing in. If you remember, he invited all leaders of South Asia. Now, that was a very significant step undertaken by him. He was a newcomer onto the national level. He was a chief minister, that's true, but this was his swearing in as India's prime minister for the first time, and he invited all leaders of South Asia. That sent a strong message across the region as to what he wants to do. He wants to engage across the border, and he has done that. His area of engagement, obviously, he's looking at things like BIMSTEC. He's looking at IORA. He's looking at much greater cooperation, not just with South Asia, but coupling South Asia with the rest of Asia in terms of going into Southeast Asia.
Mr. Cook, now with that background in our heads, let's now take a look at the run-up to the Indian elections. We've seen certain incidents, military incidents happening involving Pakistan and India. Then after some time we saw an IS threat attack in Sri Lanka. We've seen a development in terrorism in countries like Bangladesh as well. We saw how announcements were made by the IS in the run-up to the Indian elections. Do you think these also played a role for Narendra Modi to be re-elected to a stance where he's now as stronger, or rather he had more power than he did before? Do you think that played a role politically as well?
Certainly developments with Pakistan did play a role. We go back to February, and the rise in tension that took place did contribute to him having to take a very strong stance.
Yeah.
He might not have personally wanted to go that far. But we don't know that for sure. But certainly he had to react in a very strong manner, and he came out pretty strong in terms of how he reacted to what happened. It may have not been that helpful to Indo-Pakistan relations, but this is election year. He had to be very mindful of that. His response at that point would decipher, and we would translate as to what was going to happen with his own party's candidature. And it appears that the gamble that he took at that point has paid off for him internally. There are also other policies that he has brought about. It's not only the international dimension in terms of his monetary policy, how he looks at his economics, how he wants to reform the country, what he is doing. You see, he's working very closely with institutions like the AIIB. Now, just last year, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank had their third general meeting in Mumbai. Now, if you were to watch the speech of Prime Minister Modi on that occasion, he talked about 25 projects in about 20 countries that are taking place at the moment, funded by the AIIB. He said the AIIB in 2018 was providing $4 billion. He called on the AIIB to increase that to 40 billion by 2020 and to 100 billion by 2025. Now, you see a very direct connection there of how he wants to work with international organizations. And this is an international organization, International Banking Corporation, founded in China. So internationally, he certainly is looking at things from a very different prism. And we're going to see a much stronger leader, much stronger India. India's presence is going to be felt that much more, not only in our region, but very importantly, internationally.
Mr. Cook, now with that we'll come back to our country and take a look at what's happening to us as in the region. We have close ties with India, we have close ties with countries like China and even the United States of America, though allegations are raised onto USA with regard to the current situation. Let's not focus at that at the moment, but our links to these countries seem to be limited to these countries. And from a media perspective, or from the perspective of the general public, if you ask 5 people which countries we have strong allies with, one would name India, China and USA, and not any other country. Do you see Sri Lanka moving towards other countries, or should we move towards other countries?
Absolutely. We certainly have to look at a much bigger playing field in terms of countries that we are going to interact with. We have had historic ties with countries across the world, whether it be countries in Africa, whether it be countries in the Arab world, European connections that have continued to play a critical role, countries in Asia. I mean, Asia is wide in terms of its spread. We're looking at countries from Australia to Japan to the Republic of Korea to ASEAN countries with which we have extremely good ties. We have historic connections, take it on a Buddhist perspective, with countries like Thailand, countries like Myanmar. Now this is where we should be looking, going into the future, identifying key windows into regions. What are the countries that are going to play a critical role in supporting us? A resolution in our favor, a resolution coming against us. How do we lobby a particular country in a region to lobby on our behalf in that particular region?
Absolutely.
Take ASEAN, for example. Sri Lanka has a very strong Buddhist connection with Thailand. We give them Upasampada in the 1700s. They gave us Upasampada in the 1700s. We had given it to them in the 1500s. Now we can trace back a long lineage of connectivity. Now, what more we can do today? I mean, in the last 100 years alone, we've seen the cooperation we receive from a country like Thailand. From rain-making technology to support that we received for development of Buddhist monasteries in the past, a lot of support has been coming from that country. Now, this is something that we can use to our benefit and also benefit Thailand in the process. And they would be more than willing to come on board there. Now, at that point, Thailand becomes a key ally in ASEAN. Now, we don't have to then call on 10 countries begging 10 countries for a vote. We approach one and we ask for their support with the other 9. Now that makes a difference.
Definitely.
Now we could do that in regions like the African Union. Sri Lanka has now positioned our embassy in Addis Ababa, where the African Union headquarters are located. We need to be doing that with other regions too. But something we must also start focusing on is when we look at the Security Council, the composition of it. 2 countries who have remained what we could call all-weather friends, Russia and China. Now this is something that we need to focus on much more significantly. 10 years ago, in 2009, Sri Lanka became a dialogue partner of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now we need to be looking at increasing our enrollment, our partnership in that particular organization. What exactly can we do? How can we cooperate? You see, Russia, China, you also have the 4 Central Asian countries, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and the Central Asian countries over there. Now, we were the first dialogue partner to come on board. After that, they've taken on Turkey, they've taken on Cambodia, they've taken on several other countries, Nepal from our region as well. Now, when that has happened, if you look at what happened last year, they had their energy summit. Turkey, as a dialogue partner, took on chairmanship of the Energy Summit. Now, Turkey is a dialogue partner, not a full member. So, Turkey is playing a critical role in pushing energy-driven policies in the SCO. Now, how much more we can do in that area? I mean, we are now 10 years after the defeat of terrorism on Sri Lankan soil. We have the expertise, we have the know-how, we have the technology, we've done it. We have a homegrown solution. This model needs to be taken out. We need to explain this to the world. We need to talk about it. It's not a case of looking back at the past and thinking, okay, that's over, that's finished, let's look to the future. We need to take the experience that we gained into the future. And that is where in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, we can see a much greater degree of involvement with countries like Russia and China, because now India and Pakistan are also members. As of 2017, those 2 countries were taken on board. Now, you would think they would take one or the other, but they took both, which is very strategic on their part. They didn't want to offend one or the other. Now, India and Pakistan are going to be working together in the SCO, and the SCO conducts military drills. They have military exercises. You can call them war games or peace games or whatever it is. India and Pakistan are going to be cooperating there. You know, you're not going to have a situation where they're going to cooperate there and come back and bicker in South Asia. So it is going to have a ripple effect. It's not going to happen immediately. We're looking at 10 to 15 years down the line. But what Russia and China have done in including India and Pakistan is very significant for South Asia. Now, how much of a bigger role we can play? We can seek the support of Russia and China to increase our membership from a dialogue partner to becoming a full-time member. It will take some time, but the process can be embarked upon. It is something that will help us, and we'll be able to contribute something onto this table as well.
Mr. Cook, now interestingly, you brought up the example of China and Russia here. Now, Sri Lanka, if you take a look at, I'm going to draw back from the question I asked you earlier as well. When it comes to each government, the policy towards certain countries seem to be shifting. We saw when former President Mahinda Rajapaksa and his government was holding power, there was a tendency to go towards China. Now we see a tendency to go towards the West. The UNP-led government seems to be going towards the West. This lack of consistency when it comes to international policy seems to be a question that we are faced with every changing government. Do you not see a situation where we will come up with maybe a national policy to stay that does not change from government to government how they want it to be changed? Do you not see the importance of it at the moment?
This is where we have to evolve a common national strategy of which is going to be accepted across the board. Very hard. This is the democracy. You're mindful of that. We have different voices, different opinions, different stances, but we have national interest. Yes. What is in keeping with our national interest? Target that. That has to be our goal. So if you want to achieve a particular target, national interest, what are the ways and means by which you do it? You may have one way of doing it, I may have another way of doing it, but we both must want to do the same thing.
Yeah.
The final goal has to be important. So how we go about executing it may vary, but our national interest has to be identified at that stage. And over a period of time, it becomes a consistent policy. We saw with regard to China, 1952, when the Dudley Senanayake government signs the Rubberized Pact, it is continued by all governments up to the 80s, whilst the agreement continued.
Yes.
So there was an acceptance by both main parties at the time of the China Rubberized Pact. So that continued. So similarly, we can evolve similar strategies down the line. We have to achieve similar strategies down the line because otherwise we tend to lose focus of where we want to get to. You don't want to keep reinventing the wheel and trying to go back to a place where someone has already been to. Whether it is with relations with China or Russia or America, we need all these countries. We have to work with all of these countries. We also have to remember of looking at the situation from their perspective. You see, when you look at a country like America, a country like India, a country like China, certain scholars have talked about those as being continents more than countries, given the diversity just within one country. We've got to understand that. We've got to empathize with that situation. It's much easier for us to think of it only from our perspective. How are they reacting to us? How are they dealing with us? That is something we have to be very mindful of.
Mr. Cook, now again, from when you look at it from the other side, when these countries interact with countries like Sri Lanka, especially during a time of turmoil, we've seen how countries came forward to extend their support to Sri Lanka in the April 21st attacks as well. But there seems to be, it's not like that the government is saying, no, we don't want to have affiliations with your country. It does not. That's not what's happening. They also, while having one foot on one area, they also go and talk to another. But that is not clear. That seems to be the problem here. One party goes to China, the president goes to China. We see foreign minister going to USA at the same time. So a person who may be in the political sphere in India might look at this and say, what's happening? Because one party is there, one party is here. Where do we play? So with this, what I'm trying to ask you is, this the lack of clarity with regard to our foreign policy or what we want with these countries seem to be getting us into more trouble than it is attracting help from those countries altogether. So again, where do we see our country going forward in terms of a policy-based approach to this problem? Do we see a future like that, or do we have a long time to go to have something like that for our country?
Chaturanga, let's go back a couple of years. It was 2017, if I'm not mistaken, when President Sirisena undertook a state visit to Russia.
Yes.
Now, as he was entering the Kremlin, on that same day, we had a very rare moment in our diplomacy where the White House put out a statement talking about what Sri Lanka had achieved so far, the progress the country had made, and they were acknowledging the progress made. It was a very rare moment. We're undertaking a state visit to Russia, the Americans at the same time acknowledging the progress we have made. Now, even in terms of what has happened right now, whether the president was in one country and the foreign minister in another, it's very important for us to understand we're not playing one against the other. That's not what's happening here. It's very important to send a very strong message out there. I mean, if we go back to the Rajapaksa administration, you had the Chinese president, the Japanese prime minister visiting us during a very short period of time. It was just 2 weeks, I think, between the two. Very good, very important. We need both countries. Just like we need China and Japan, we need all the other countries across the board. So the more we interact, the more we exchange, the more they realize too the fact that they need to up their momentum with us. They need to cooperate with us that much more, because we've also got lots of options out there. So it's not a case of us putting all our eggs into one basket. We need to rely on multiple partners in the international community, because as a small country, we are not in a position to take on a situation of complete hatred towards one or complete love towards the other. That's not possible. We need all of these countries. Every one of them has a vote in the UN system. Every one of them has investment that they can send our way. Every one of them has opportunities that we can harvest in our favor. We also want to trade with them. We want to trade with countries across the board, irrespective of their size, their economic prosperity. We want to trade with them. We are not come to a position where we say we do not want support, partnership with any country. The more, the better.
Yeah.
So the larger our area of interaction, the better it will be for us.
Mr. Cook, again, I want to now go back to our initial problem of the April 21st attacks. We've seen, as I asked you earlier, we've seen countries coming forward to extend their support to us as well. But I want to ask this from a more slightly economic perspective as well. We have to move forward from this situation. We have to again attract tourism to a certain degree to come to that level. With all of that happening, are you able to give me an understanding of what internationally, there have been other countries in the region that have faced similar situations, and they seem to have reeled back from the effects of that tragedy. Us as Sri Lankans, the country as a whole, what should we do to move forward?
You see, in the immediate aftermath of the Easter Sunday attacks, the outpouring of support for Sri Lanka was overwhelming. Leaders were tweeting from around the world. Messages of sympathy were pouring in. Personal messages were coming into people from contacts that we had around the world. This was a very important moment. Sri Lanka was not being viewed in a negative sense. People were sympathetic towards the country. They wanted to help the country. They wanted to come on board. Now, we must remember, global attention is very short, the time span. We're already talking about Theresa May. I mean, the focus was on the Indian elections, and suddenly the spotlight went to London. And it keeps changing. It keeps changing very, very fast. Very soon, 21st of April is going to be in the past. It's going to be something that we have moved ahead from. On a national level, we have to be very mindful of what happened, take necessary action in terms of dealing with the situation. But internationally, we must not forget that there is a massive amount of goodwill towards the country. People want to support. We have to reach out to them. They keep asking the question, how do you want us to support you? What do you want us done? Now, we must know what kind of support we want coming from various quarters. Is it in terms of asking for some kind of assistance? Is it in terms of asking for some kind of policy advice? Is it in terms of asking for some kind of support in terms of tourism campaigns in those countries? They can do that. I mean, certain countries have, in their public transportation systems, advertisements. We sometimes can't afford to put those advertisements out there. We can request the support of those foreign countries. Can you put up advertisements in favor of Sri Lanka? They will do it. Now, these are the opportunities we need to reach out to and ask. There is a large diplomatic presence in Colombo. We have a large presence out there in the world. We should be focused on using this particular moment to target those countries, ask those countries. Every time they ask us, what can we do for you? We must have an answer for that. We shouldn't be, oh, well, it's a tough time. That should not be our answer. Our answer has got to be, we would like, if can you support us in this particular area, identify areas. That has got to be done internally. We've got to know what we want to get from the outside world. And they will come on board. It will lead to a strengthening of bilateral ties. It will also lead to a strengthening of regional support that we get. In South Asia alone, in Southeast Asia, East Asia, especially focusing on countries in Africa. Now, there's a lot more that we can do with these countries. With countries in Europe, very specifically, these are countries which lost nationals as well. They're very concerned about the situation. They want to come on board and help us. There's a lot that we can do in that area.
Mr. Cook, now, when you take a look at all that has been happening, I want to ask this question from you before I move on as well. The diplomatic corps, you brought this up as well, the diplomatic corps placed in Sri Lanka of these countries, a common allegation that was raised by Sri Lankans was the fact that the diplomatic corps acted in a manner, especially during the constitutional issue we had during the last year, October 26 constitutional problem, the manner in which these diplomatic personnel here acted was not in accordance with their duty. They were more or less coming in and telling the country what to do rather than, you know, providing advice and that sort of thing. So that was an allegation that was raised by the Sri Lankan community. So do you think we are depending on these diplomatic personnel who are here and the countries that they represent at the moment, and that dependency is not good for a country like us, because then we get used to the fact that we're depending on them? So do you think that's what's happening, or is there a deeper understanding that we do not see?
So this is where we have to go back to that very famous slogan, give us trade, not aid. We're looking at it from a commercial perspective. At that point, there's something for you to gain, there's something for me to gain. It has to be a two-way process. We've got to understand that they've also got their national interests, they've also got their own agendas in their respective capitals. And whoever is based in Colombo is following instructions that they have received from their foreign ministries, from their countries. So at that point, we've also got to be mindful that when we deal with countries, we've got to increase the momentum of cooperation that we extend. It's not a case of going around the world with a bowl asking for offerings or whatever it is from the international community. We've also got to be able to bring something to the table. When I mentioned the example of the SCO, we have something to contribute to them whilst getting something from them. It has got to be a two-way process. We are not living in an age in which countries are only going to give us aid. If they are giving us additional tourism, we're giving them something in return. Now we've got to work out what that something is going to be. We've really got to strategize our foreign policy in such a way where we're going to be very mindful of the fact that we are not living in an era in which developing country, poor country, we can't be focusing our attention on ourselves in that way. If we want to step up at the table, if we want to be a partner at the table, we've also got to realize that we have our international obligations as well. We've got to cooperate, we've got to work with other countries. They want to work with us, we want to work with them. It's a two-way street here. So yes, there might be pressure coming in, it might be undue pressure. We've also got to be mindful of where the pressure is coming from. Certain sectors bringing pressure, we cannot do anything about it. Or well, there's very much less that we can do about it. We've got to be mindful of power, we've got to be mindful of economic status in the world, we've got to be mindful of military might in the world. We've got, I mean, as I've said many times, we're not the center of the universe. We are another member of the international community and we are trying to cooperate with them. But of course, we need to know where to draw the line as well. We need to know what we want and how we want it. It has to be a mutually beneficial arrangement. It's not something only in favor of the giver or the foreign country. That is something that we've got to realize. We must not overstep the mark or let them overstep the mark either.
When it comes to international investments, we've seen the government coming forward and promising various investments coming in from international governments, ministries. But we've seen that these are going into the areas of private companies coming in from those countries. My question to you is going to be how to attract investment. If we have a proper foreign policy, we will know what to do when investments come in. Yes, there is a separate part when it comes to investment as well. But initially, going by, and we've seen in the past, we've seen in the recent past, even after the April 21st attacks, ministers, cabinet ministers going to various countries and trying to invest money. They're basically doing the job of a marketing executive. Things like that happen because there seems to be this inconsistency in how we reach and attract countries. So this problem, how long do you think is it going to go on?
How are we going to look at it? How are we going to go about this? That's a very important point. Imagine you had a big block of land and you want to develop the land. I come along and I say I'm going to give you so much of money, and then you're going to say, okay, where shall we build a road? Where shall we build a bridge? What shall we do? That's not how it works out. I've got to have the plan in place. I've got to know what I've designed. I've got to know what I want to do. I might have gotten your expertise to develop the plan, but then the plan is mine. You come on board and you complement what has already been done. You support it. I can't suddenly, if you have promised me so many millions of dollars, I can't just put that randomly into some kind of project. That will not work out. We've got to have a strategy of what we want to achieve. We are now 71 years down the line of independence. We've got to know at the 80th anniversary, where are we going to be? At the 100th anniversary, where do we want to be? What kind of economic status do we want to achieve? What do we want to do in terms of improving the lives of people, improving infrastructure? What areas do we want to improve in terms of agriculture? What do we want to do? You mentioned investment. What are the areas we want invested in? What are the investment parks that we are going to construct? Are we going to construct marine parks? What are we going to focus on? Now, this is where we in-house must already have the plans ready. And then you show that to investors and they get attracted at that point. And they are going to want to come and invest. That is how we become an attractive destination. It's not just a case of hoping that somebody would come from some quarter. That's not how investment would work. We've got to know what we want and invite people to come and help us achieve that particular dream.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cook, for coming here on the show. Mr. Cook, concluding his views, said that we have to know where we are standing at the 80th celebrations of our Independence Day and National Day, and even at the 100th. At this rate, we do not know where we'll end up next year for our National Day. So the government has to clearly lay out what's happening to the general public. We have to know what's happening in terms of our national security. We have to know what's happening in terms of our economy. So we have to wait and see what the government will lay out in the coming months. This being an election year, as well as social media tells us. So we have to wait and see what happens in that department as well. Again, thank you, Mr. Cook, for being here this evening and talking to us. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Chaturanga Hapwarachi. Monday, we promise that Mr. Faraj Shaukat Ali will be back to bring you an interesting guest like Mr. Cook to talk to you about the current situation in the country. Thank you very much for watching.